Thanks, Jim. That was great. I really got so much out of that. I appreciated the comment about looking at candidates in social media post-offer. That was a great learning point, as well as the emerging theme of don't be stupid from the first two speakers, and even checking out IBM's social media policy as a starting point. And I think the bigger picture of just being conscious of having a social media policy, even if it means not having one, is really smart advice. So thanks again for that, Jim. And our next panelist I'm very excited about is Sien Avalos. She is the Enterprise Compliance Manager for Becton Dickinson, where she is leading BD's cross-functional team tasked with developing the company's social media policy and supporting processes. And her handout is also in your packet. This is her handout. And I'd like to welcome Sien to the podium.
I'd like to point out that I actually set up my own little timer on my iPad, which I clearly have addiction issues with, apparently, according to Steve. So I want to spend a little bit of time today talking about internal uses of social media. How many of you today have an internal social media platform at your company? Okay. And how many of those have sort of an enterprise internal social media platform? In other words, it's not just for sales, it's not just for HR, it's for everyone. Okay, good stuff. So if we look at, actually I guess it would be item number 2 on your handouts, because I think it's like 8 slides to a page or something. There's a screenshot there, which is probably impossible for you guys to read, I'm realizing, in the tiny size that you have, but of the social platform that BD has been working on. It's actually called Yammer. I think I might have carved the name off. We're not endorsing Yammer. It just happens to be the one that we use. And I thought we'd use this screenshot to just sort of go through a little bit of some of the advantages that an internal social network can bring to your company. The first and foremost thing is that it's fully searchable, right? So, for example, as we started working on this social media project, right, I found out 4 months into it that someone in our Australia office had already drafted a social media policy, but I didn't even know that person existed. And as a result, we did all this double work, right? When you have an internal social media platform and people are talking in real time about the stuff that they're doing, had I been able to search on the term social media, hopefully I would have come across this guy in Australia who had done so much legwork already and not replicated the process. Another huge benefit to it that we're seeing already is the concept of crowdsourcing, right? So we can put ideas out there and have, in real time, lots of feedback come back to us, either by way of putting together like a little instant poll, or by just posting a comment or an idea out there, and seeing what we hear back from our associates. If you go to sort of the next item on your handout, there's actually independent research that indicates that there's a tremendous amount of potential savings around internal social media, specifically in the area that we just talked about, right? They calculated that they thought it was about 3.5 million in savings for the average organization in preventing duplicate work. Because especially BD is a pretty sizable company. We're in 52 countries. It's impossible to know everything that's going on everywhere all the time. And it's amazing to see, how many sort of replicated projects you can end up having just because people can't communicate effectively. It also definitely helps with new hires. We've seen some of that already, where you can get a new hire up to speed much faster, or even someone that's just going into a new role, because they can sort of almost read a transcript of what's been going on around a certain project before they got there. So the first consideration, which we certainly thought about when we started looking to roll this out, is there really interest among your associates for having this? And we ultimately did a survey of our population to just get a feel for what did they think would be the most valuable aspects of this to them. And what we found was actually a little bit different than what we expected. We found that they were actually, what they were most interested in was around the sort of concept of associate engagement. They wanted a platform where they could share their ideas and get instant feedback from their peers about their ideas. The tool that we use actually has sort of a built-in functionality that allows people to post ideas and allows other employees to vote on those ideas in real time. The most popular ones sort of bubble up to the top. So that, what we're finding is that associates that felt that maybe they weren't being heard before, that had valuable things to say, are now having a platform to be able to share their concepts. After that, what they were most interested in was around the idea of networking and relationship building, which is kind of more along the lines of what we expected. So then, the question too is, are they ready, right? And we definitely, like every organization, have quite the span of social media savviness. We have our folks that are, fresh out of college, that are sort of have their hand in their pocket and are tweeting and texting while they're talking to you, And then we have, some of our more seasoned folks that, are, still calling, still saying, "Are you on the Facebook?" Things along those lines. So we tried to get a feel for where a lot of our associates were along this spectrum, and we gave them 5 categories to sort of pick from, right? So we asked, do you feel that you're a creator, right? In other words, do you actually create content that gets posted to the social web? Are you posting videos to YouTube? Are you posting things on Facebook? Are you writing reviews of products? Or are you, just a critic, right? You're not, you're just sort of out there assessing other people's creations. So you're writing critiques of maybe, a blog posting or something, but you're not creating it yourself. The collector. Someone who is really, really good, almost like a good researcher, who is able to sort of pull lots of different information from lots of different sources, and they use Twitter, they use RSS feeds or something along those lines to sort of bring all the information into them that they're most interested in. And then the spectator, someone who, for example, may just read reviews or purely read content. They're not contributing in any way. And then we have the total inactive, which honestly, when we sent this out, we thought we're not going to get any of those, because we essentially said, like, to be inactive, you could never have read a review of a product. Or miraculously, though, we had 7% of our population come back as inactive. I don't know if that means that they're still using typewriters, but I find that really fascinating. And not surprisingly, we had about the same percentage identifying themselves as creators, which is a little bit less than what you see on in the average sort of web environment with the average user, but not so different. So we started thinking about, it's fine to be a spectator when you're talking about sort of the public web, right? Because you don't need, you have, let's say, the 20% of people that are actually creating content. But when you have an internal social platform, if you don't have a lot of people creating content, you're not going to extract value from that platform. So we tried to think about, how do we get these spectators, we just sort of put the inactives aside for a little while. How do we get these spectators to actually start being creators? And so what we started doing was looking at things, and this we admittedly haven't rolled out yet, but we're in the process of doing, is looking at reverse mentoring opportunities, right? So we have, we have sort of the influx of maybe the younger population that's uber savvy on this, and sort of setting them up with some of our more senior people so that they can, have sort of a two-way mentoring session. They can train them on, how to use social media and sort of be on call if they're trying to figure out, what they want to do with Twitter or how they can use it better. But also then, they get the benefit of interacting with someone that's much more senior than they might normally interact with. We also integrated built-in help, so right into the platform we have, the platform itself comes with help, but we added some additional things, and we added some non-monetary incentives, so things along the lines of executive-hosted discussions. So in other words, I'm on Yammer, you should be on Yammer too. So question number. Sorry. Oh, I apologize. The other thing that we found worked really, really well with our senior folks, and is that sort of slide where you see that screenshot of Twitter RSS feeds and sort of just a Twitter feed in the center, was that we found in general that folks that don't use social media at all are more likely to see value in Twitter once you show them how to use it. So, I've sat down with a number of execs personally and, got them to go from, I don't care what Ashton Kutcher's doing, to, wow, I could totally see how this is a valuable tool. So sometimes it's just that little selling process, but Twitter seems to be the one that they get more than others because it's a way for them to sort of pull information into themselves in a very, very efficient way. So then, which sort of gets to some of what Jim was talking about, the question is, are we ready as an organization? Are we ready to jump into this? And I know Steve's social media policy is don't be stupid, but as we all well, I'm sure know in this room, they are always stupid. It amazes me the things that people do. So, we fully recognized that social media guidelines are what they are. They're guidelines, right? But at least let's try to educate folks as to what the intelligent behavior is. A good example of something that we found isn't intuitive is associates who decide that, they see sort of a negative thing posted about the company and think that they're doing us a really big favor by going out there and arguing with that person online and telling them how great the company in fact is. And it's the best intentioned thing that they're doing, not really the greatest thing for us. So, just basic training around things that aren't necessarily intuitive, we're finding is really helpful. We've been developing an online course sort of as we speak. Integrating terms of use right into the site so they're right there is another helpful one. The great thing about this site, this tool, is you can push broadcast reminders to the whole company in multiple languages if if that's what you need, so that they're sort of getting it in their feed and being reminded what this tool is for. And just make it really clear as to who the designated contacts for misuse are. Just sort of one last learning that we're having from this is that I guess we went into it thinking everybody, we built it, they will come. Not necessarily the case. It did take a certain amount of sort of gardening and community building and really engaging the folks that are sort of the early adopters of this stuff to get it moving. There are definitely still we have the 7% inactives that are still holding out. So it's not super easy, but it does have value once you do it. So thanks.
Thanks so much, Sien. That was another wonderful presentation. I really appreciated how you're trying to enforce the don't be stupid policy through education. That was great to hear. And it was really also good to hear that social media can really help more junior people get heard in the organization and can help with onboarding. That was really great perspective. So anyway, let's start our Q&A now. And what I would like to do is take questions from the audience or people back on the stage. And if you could state your name, and if you have an organizational affiliation, please state that as well. Kate.
I just want to ask you, when you say that that person was well-intentioned and really wasn't doing the right thing, when someone posts something negative, what would be the right thing?
So the question is, when people are well-intentioned, but then they post something negative and they weren't doing the right thing, what would be the thing that the company could do, essentially, to deal with that?
Right. So what we tell them in our guidelines and in our training is that when you're speaking on behalf of the company, even if it's in a social platform like that, you're essentially being a company spokesperson. And there's only a small group of people that are, official company spokespeople that can speak on behalf of BD as an entity. So that's the general guidance we give to them, that, let the PR people handle it, let the corporate communications people handle it. Don't worry about it.
Yeah, I mean, one of the things from a legal perspective that plays in with Becton Dickinson is that it's in a highly regulated industry of medical device. So every statement that's out there that could be seen as coming from the company has requirements of balance and complete disclosure and the like. So what the employee should do in that situation is merely convey that message somehow to either somebody like Sien, who's overseeing these things, or directly to the marketing department, and let them deal with whoever they need to deal with to get the right message out. It may be a direct response, or it may be, we don't need to directly respond to that individual post, but we want to enhance our messaging in other sections. As Steve said earlier, flood the market somewhere else rather than get into a back and forth.
Okay, great. Thank you. Roy, did you have a question?
Actually, it's to follow up on this. Given that social media comfort may be a generational thing, how do you know when somebody's actually stepped over the line? Because it may not feel that way to somebody who's, say, 22, whereas for somebody who's 45, it could be a gross violation of company policy.
So the
judgment, but if there are uniform standards, how do you really enforce a policy?
So the question is, how do you know when someone stepped over the line, and how do you enforce the policy given that gray area?
The challenge here is, how do you know when somebody stepped over the line on the telephone? I mean, I think it's the same kind of measurement that you use. The question is, how do you train that into your organization? I mean, today, when a phone call comes in, it comes to one individual, they have to be prepared to answer it. In social media, that statement or that interchange or that interaction is available to everyone. And so it's a question of making sure that you have a measured response to it. But I don't know that it's a generational issue. It's based on business acumen. You wouldn't respond to something in social media differently than you would necessarily on the telephone. The challenge with social is that it's going to be found by Google and indexed and be there in perpetuity. And so to the point that's been made by my colleagues on the panel, there are appropriate individuals to whom those responses should be left.
Great, thank you. Yes, your name and organization, if any.
Lawrence there. It just strikes me that this is part of a broader change in the way we run this. A command and control culture, which is a traditional culture that wants to control everything. It seems to me that what Sien is doing is creating a collaborative culture. The social media are changing the way organizations see themselves. I'm just asking for a comment.
So a comment on command and control culture versus collaborative culture that Sien has been talking about.
Well, from my perspective, I think that there are elements of cultural change, but in reality, all business has always been about harnessing power. And whether it's harnessing the power of water by channeling it into something narrow to spin a water wheel, or, channeling fire. Yeah, if you don't control it, it can flood you, burn you down. But if you do control it, channel it, and access it, you can get great power out of it. I think that's what Sien is doing. It's not giving up command and control. It's saying there's a new element here that we must command and control. I mean, at least that's how I look at it.
I think it's just a new tool that gives you access to what they're calling the hive mind, right? It's this collective intelligence. And Yammer's a very popular platform. To give you an example outside of BD, Deloitte has member firms around the world. The Australian member firm has 5,000 employees. 3,500 of them use Yammer every single day. So the opportunity for them to get access to that intellectual capital and to answer questions very quickly and to deploy teams against challenges is enabled by the technology. But again, we've been social creatures forever. It's just a question of how you use it and how you harness it.
Great. Other questions? Yes, in the back. Your name and organization, if any.
Jeremy Rosenfeld, National Basketball Association. I was wondering, what some of the security concerns are around using some of the internal applications where you're putting out so much information, out there on, networks, IT, and just, what kind of security concerns need to be adhered to?
So the question is about what types of security concerns need to be adhered to given all the information that's being put out there.
Well, obviously, if you're talking about an internal platform, you want to make sure that you have policies and procedures in place that keep it internal. Certainly there are many discussions that Steve and Sien have referred to about accessing the collective intelligence or putting teams together that you want to use for the betterment of your organization and not have competitors have access to it. From a legal perspective, we help develop those kind of policies and put those things in place. Those are security details. Now, some of them are in legal policy. Some of them, which these guys may be able to speak more to, are in technological improvements or security measures. But yeah, security is vitally important because, obviously from a business perspective and a legal perspective, I'm not recommending that people simply create a standard Facebook page and have all their employees join it and it's sort of easy. And no, I mean, you want to do something that's very different, and there are very the different legal ways and different technological ways to put security into it is vitally important.
Okay, great. Somebody have on stage. You have a question? Yes.
Yes, my name is Deborah Karp. I'm from AXA Art Insurance Corporation. And my question is, I'd like to get your comments or your reaction to something like Reputation.com in regard to any of us can go online and can go onto a Facebook or a Twitter page, onto Twitter, and represent ourselves as someone else. How do you protect a company against someone representing themselves as an executive of the firm?
Great question. So the question is, how do you protect the company from people who are representing themselves falsely as an executive in the firm?
I would come back to, what do you do in the real world? Yeah. I mean, again, I think it's common sense. I mean, if there are people out there that are foolish enough to follow somebody blindly because they represent themselves as an executive of the firm, then you've got sheep out in the marketplace. I mean, let me give you a different paradigm, and maybe this will help, and maybe it won't. I like analogies. I remember when credit cards, when you use them at a restaurant, they gave you a carbon copy. And people would steal those carbon copies, and that's how they got your credit card numbers. And everybody freaked out. Well, when the internet came along, everybody said, I'm not going to shop online because somebody's going to steal my credit card number. It was already happening. So again, when somebody represents themselves as working for AXA in the real world and they can print up a business card at Kinko's, I don't think there's much difference in terms of what they do in the social spaces other than the fact that it reaches many more people more quickly.
Okay, great. We have time for one more quick question. In the back, yes.
Hi, Jay Cruz, Rainforest Alliance. What do you recommend to police what's happening on the internet?
The question is, what do you recommend to police what's happening on the internet?
I don't know if I would recommend policing it necessarily. I mean, it's so massive and so hard to police. One of the things that we're finding is that if you provide your associates with the opportunity to sort of do these things safely, to get back to the security question, you're more likely to be able to just sort of keep it under a more comfortable level of control. For example, you can go into Yammer and set up a free platform without any authorization from the company at all. And when we went to go look at the platform, we found we had a heap of sales associates already in there. Now, this was not a secured platform. I'm sure you all have run into similar things where you have people putting things out on Google Docs and everywhere else. One of the easiest ways, I think, is almost to just sort of provide them with the ability to do it themselves in a safer way.
I just think that reputation management is part and parcel of being in social. You can use search.twitter.com to look for mentions of yourself. You can use Google to look for mentions of yourself. We have clients like Enterprise Rent-A-Car that have set up customer care teams that all they do is monitor the social spaces all day long. I'm not suggesting you need a whole command center for that, but it is absolutely a critical part of having a social media presence.
Okay, great. Thanks, everybody. And Kate's going to say a final word. Thank you.
Was this great or what? I got so many great ideas. Yay, yay. And thanks to Rob Hellman, thanks for John Arnetta, thanks for Chip Conlon, and of course our great panelists. And if you'd like to say hello to Chris Savino, our new president, feel free to do that. And we'll see you all next time. Thank you, thank you.